Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to Hot Mike. I'm your co-host, Bill Whittle. Hot Mike isn't here today. It's going to just take a quick second here. Most people probably don't know this, but Hot Mike is passionate about several things in life. And one of the things he's most passionate about is spats. He's like Jerry Seinfeld, who won't wear the same pair of sneakers twice. Hot Mike has to wear new spats all the time. He said he tried ordering on Amazon, but they're nothing but cheap Chinese plastic knockoffs. So Hot Mike went to the one place where they make really excellent silk spats, and that's Savannah. So he cashed in his life savings, bought 722 pairs of brand new spats made out of silk, flew back to Los Angeles, and he's currently at LAX in holding because he doesn't have enough money to pay for President Trump's new spats tariff that he imposed on Cuba. So we expect to see him back hopefully by next week, as soon as we can raise the money. In any event, just a quick show today to endorse Dan Bongino for Deputy Administrator of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I've just one of many voices chipping in on this subject. I wouldn't say I'm a friend of Dan's or anything. Strangely enough, I've never been on Dan's show, but Dan's been on my show. Back when I was doing the Hot Mic show for NRA TV back in 2016, he was a regular guest calling in. He's one of the few commentators on the conservative side that I actually spend some time watching. So I would just like to explain why I think Dan Bongino is going to succeed on three different levels. And how those three levels apply not only to Dan, but to all of the rest of the people that Donald Trump has brought into his Trump 2.0 government. Dan Bongino, of course, is a true believer, and I'll get to that in a minute. But so is Pete Hegseth, and so is Kash Patel, and so is Pam Bondi, and so is Marco Rubio. And so is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and so are all the rest of them. These people are not bureaucrats, and they're not career politicians. They're fighters. They are true believers. I was going to say they're crusaders, but a better term for Trump's appointees is they are paladins. A paladin is a knight who fights on the side of righteousness and can show no cowardice in the face of the enemy. He is on a holy mission, and a paladin is untouchable. He is untouchable. You may kill a paladin, but you will never corrupt one. And all across the spectrum of Trump's selections, we see nothing but paladins. So let me talk about this particular paladin. Now, as far as his qualifications go, he's got college qualifications. He's got a bachelor. Sorry, he has a bachelor's and a master's degree in psychology. I almost said he has a bastard's degree in psychology. That's probably what you should just call it, I guess. He's got a bastard's degree in psychology as well as a master's in business administration. So he knows how to take care of large organizations, but I consider that to be the absolute lowest of his qualifications. The main qualification for Dan Bongino to be deputy director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation is that he started out as a policeman working the streets in New York City and eventually became an active Secret Service agent. And what that means is that Dan brings a kind of experience to the FBI that the kind of people that are normally appointed to high positions in the FBI don't have. And that is operational street-level experience. Pete Hegseth is a perfect example of this. To divert to Pete Hegseth just for a moment, when Pete Hegseth went out there and started running with regular soldiers at 5 o'clock in the morning, on a rainy day in Germany, what Pete Hegseth was doing was rebuilding the military in a way that nobody other than a paladin could. I am a history buff. I've been paid to write history series, and I'm a student of military history. If I had to pick the single most important quality that I've seen throughout my study of human history and human warfare, it would be morale. Morale by far. Initiative second, and then supply and all the rest of that stuff after that. Morale by far. When regular members of the armed forces who've been told that we don't want war fighters, we want diversity, equity, and inclusion, see the Secretary of Defense in shorts running in freezing cold weather at 5 o'clock in the morning, that does more to build morale for the military than any number of pamphlets, brochures, statements, proclamations by the president. It's absolutely essential. And this is the kind of street operational credibility that Dan Bongino is going to bring to the FBI. As an example, one of the criticisms of the way the Secret Service has operated is that Dan has said, yeah, it's great having, a bunch of guys in dark blue suits with sunglasses on. But that just simply shows any assassin or attempted assassin exactly where the threat is. real intelligence work, real security work, would have fewer guys in uniform and more guys absolutely blending into the crowd, not wearing their earpieces, not touching their ears, not wearing the shades, not looking like those groups of feds that we've seen before. That simple observation is the kind of thing that eludes somebody who would become FBI director by coming up through the bureaucracy. That is a practical level of intelligence that you have to earn by being on the street, walking through crowds, preparing yourself to throw yourself in front of somebody's pistol. That's a quality that Dan Bongino has. And I think the most important way to talk about this is this kind of common sense experience, on the job experience, has what I want to call predictive intelligence. Predictive intelligence is being so familiar with the environment, in the case of the Secret Service, the threat environment, being so familiar with the day-to-day operations of what you do to stop those threats, that it allows you to predict threats in the future. That's all intelligence is. Everybody's, constantly yapping about how important intelligence is. It's good to be smart, but all intelligence really does for an individual or a species or a being or whatever the case may be is allow them to see patterns and predict future outcomes. Intelligence is predictive. And you cannot teach the kind of intelligence that Dan Bongino has earned over the course of decades of working on the street level. So that's kind of the first level of my ringing endorsement for Dan Bongino. The second level is entirely different. We have seen our government institutions corrupted by bloodless, colorless, bureaucratic, gray blurs. The previous director of the CIA, going all the way back to whenever this decay started to happen, certainly by the Obama administration, but really starting in the 60s. This faceless bureaucrat who is appointed to a position, and I mean no disrespect to the certainly to the naval history of George H.W. Bush, but that is a prime example of the kind of CIA director I'm talking about. What you get with Dan is you get a lot of brains, you get a lot of guts, but you also get a lot of heart. And heart really matters, especially when the threat to the country and to the FBI comes from within the FBI. Anybody who's listened to Dan Bongino's podcasts and his entire career knows that when something goes south, when there's something that makes us ashamed, like the withdrawal from Afghanistan under the Biden administration, for example, it hurts him to see this. It hurts him to see our country wounded by incompetence, cowardice, and outright treason in many cases. Dan gets angry about these kind of things, and he wears that anger on his sleeve. He wears it on his sleeve not to virtue signal. He wears it on his sleeve because it's genuine, it's real. This is why I trust Dan Bongino, because I have seen him and heard him speak for at least 10 years without him looking for the job. Dan feels things. And he feels things like a patriot, and he feels things like a lawman. Dan Bongino, one of the reasons I chose this thumbnail for this, Dan Bongino is not in law enforcement. Dan Bongino is a crime fighter. And there's a big difference. Law enforcement is bloodless and mechanical and bureaucratic. Crime fighters are born. Crime fighters are angered by crime. They're repulsed by crime. And the bigger the crime, the more angry they feel. And when you see Dan talking about the level of crime that's been happening at the highest levels of our government, you know you've got a guy who is offended, personally, physically offended, and sickened by crimes against the American people committed by those people who we have elected or selected to lead this country. So there's that. And then finally, the third level is sort of a meta level. Dan, of course, is a constitutionalist. All patriots, real patriots, are constitutionalists. I've never, ever met a person that I consider to be an American patriot who wasn't a devout constitutionalist. And the appointment of Dan Bongino to this level of crime fighting is a vindication of the entire theory of government that we operate under. It is a vindication of the idea that regular people can govern themselves, because the first person to tell you that Dan Bongino is just a regular guy is Dan Bongino. This is the genius of the American experiment. It's the essence of it, and it's what's been squashed and stolen from us by generation after generation after generation of people saying, trust the experts. I don't trust the experts. I've seen what the experts have done. I've seen what the bureaucrats have done. I've seen what the career politicians have done. I've seen what the people who climb up through the ranks of the administration have done. I've seen what all of these intellectuals have done. I've seen all of it, and I don't like it, and you don't either. The fact that a regular guy can be appointed deputy director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation means that we are about to see whether or not the entire idea, the entire experiment has merit. Because if the founders were right and regular people can govern themselves and enforce their own laws, then we should see a fairly rapid attack on the entire idea of criminal behavior at all levels, from people who store emails on a server in somebody's bathroom to the lowest level street criminals that are dealing drugs and murdering their opponents. All across the spectrum, we should begin to see a law enforcement advance and a law enforcement offensive against the entire idea of crime. Because we have allowed crime to become part of our daily lives in this country to the point where we don't even think about it anymore. It's going to be one thing to clean up the FBI. It's going to be one thing to get rid of all of the agents that were implicit or complicit in the coup to eliminate Donald Trump as an effective leader in his first term. And that's going to take a lot of work. But for this country and this culture to survive, we're going to have to see a return to the idea of law-abiding citizens. And there is no indication for the last, certainly 4 years, that the law is anything other than something to be laughed at. And Dan Bongino, who I don't know well enough to call a friend, but who I certainly would call a colleague, loves the idea of law and order and hates crime and criminals, and therefore could not be in a better place at a better time. And I would just like to say, as far as I'm concerned, I'm just damn glad to know the guy and be able to say that I've shaken his hand. And I think he's going to do an astonishing job as just the latest in this entire roundtable of uncorruptible, true believing paladins that Donald Trump has assembled and simply deployed. That's the final thing I'd like to say. Donald Trump has been criticized by the left as being too egotistical, too monomaniacal, too megalomaniacal to allow other people into the spotlight. And what we've seen with Trump 2.0 is a president who has moved with astonishing confidence and appointed the brightest people he could find in terms of Elon Musk, and not only the brightest people he could find, the brightest people there are, period, full stop, to investigate government fraud. True believers in defense, true believers in justice, true believers in national intelligence, true believers in health and human services, true believers in what? True believers in the idea that the American people are sovereign over the government and not the other way around. And isn't that a breath of fresh air? I'm Bill Whittle. We'll see you next time right here on Hot Mic.